German Shepherd found. Crying at owner's empty grave. What baby did next. Left everyone in tears. The sound of rain hitting the umbrella was almost enough to drown out the soft crying. Almost, but not quite. What happened next would change everything. If you're about to listen to this story, prepare your heart. This isn't just another animal rescue story. It's about a connection that defies explanation. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let us know where you're listening from. Sarah Mitchell didn't want to visit the cemetery that day. The clouds hung low, threatening to burst at any moment, and her 5-year-old son Noah had been unusually quiet all morning. But it had been exactly 1 year since her father passed away, and some traditions couldn't be broken, not even for the weather. "Do we have to go, Mommy?" Noah asked, his small fingers fidgeting with the seatbelt. His eyes, large and questioning, reflected in the rearview mirror. "Just for a little while, sweetie," Sarah replied, her voice gentle but firm. "We'll put flowers for Grandpa, say hello, and then we can get ice cream on the way home." Noah's face brightened slightly at the mention of ice cream, but the shadow returned almost immediately. "Grandpa can't really hear us, can he?" Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "How do you explain grief and remembrance to a 5-year-old? It's not about him hearing us, Noah. It's about us remembering him." The first drops of rain hit the windshield as they pulled into Evergreen Cemetery. The place was deserted. No one else was brave enough to visit loved ones in this weather. Sarah parked close to the path that led to her father's plot. Section E, row 12, 3 graves from the oak tree. "Keep your hood up," she instructed as she helped Noah out of the car. She balanced the umbrella in one hand and clutched a small bouquet of daisies, her father's favorite, in the other. Noah took her free hand, and together they navigated the rain-slicked path between the headstones. They were halfway to her father's grave when Noah stopped suddenly. "What's that sound?" he asked. His head tilted slightly. Sarah paused, listening. At first, all she heard was the steady drumming of rain on the umbrella and the distant rumble of traffic beyond the cemetery walls. Then she caught it, a low, sorrowful sound that sliced through the rain. A whimper that grew into a mournful howl before fading back to a cry. "It sounds like a dog," Sarah said, her brow furrowing. "It's probably nothing, Noah. Let's—" But Noah had already dropped her hand, darting between the headstones, following the sound. "Noah!" Sarah called, trying to keep her voice down out of respect for the cemetery. "Noah, come back here right now!" She hurried after him, careful not to slip on the wet grass, the bouquet of daisies clutched tightly in her hand. When she caught up to her son, he was standing still as a statue, staring at something on the ground. There, lying beside a freshly dug grave with no headstone yet, was a German Shepherd. The dog's coat was matted with mud and rain, ribs visible beneath the wet fur. It lay with its head on its paws, a low, heartbreaking whine escaping its throat. The sound wasn't just sad, it was a cry filled with such raw grief that Sarah felt it in her chest. "He's crying, Mommy," Noah whispered, his eyes wide with concern. The dog raised its head at the sound of Noah's voice, amber eyes wary and defensive. A growl rumbled in its throat, but there was no energy behind it, just a reflexive warning from an animal too exhausted to flee. "Noah, step back," Sarah said quietly, reaching for her son's shoulder. "He might be dangerous." The dog wore a collar, she noticed. Not a stray then. The metal tag caught what little light filtered through the clouds. Scout. "He's not dangerous," Noah said with absolute certainty. "He's just really, really sad." Before Sarah could stop him, Noah took a step toward the German Shepherd. She lunged forward to grab him, but froze when she saw what happened next. The dog's posture changed. The growl faded, replaced by a curious whine. Its ears, which had been flattened against its head, perked up slightly as Noah approached. "It's okay," Noah said, his voice suddenly different. Not the voice of a 5-year-old talking to a dog, but something else entirely. Something older. "I know you miss them." Sarah watched, heart in her throat, as her son knelt beside the massive dog. Scout could easily knock Noah over with a single paw, could hurt him badly if frightened, but instead, the German Shepherd lowered its head, allowing Noah to place a small hand on its wet fur. "He's talking to me, Mommy," Noah whispered, his eyes still locked with the dog's. "In here." He tapped his temple. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold rain ran down Sarah's spine. "What's he saying, Noah?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Noah tilted his head, as if listening to something only he could hear. "He says his person isn't really here. Someone took his person away." Sarah glanced at the fresh grave, just turned earth with no marker. Who was buried here, and why would a dog be left to mourn alone in the rain? "We need to call someone," Sarah said, taking out her phone. "Animal control can help him find his family." Noah shook his head vigorously. "No, they'll take him away. Scout says he needs to find his person." The name, Scout, gave Sarah pause. She hadn't told Noah what was on the dog's tag. Had he somehow read it? Or... She pushed the thought away. "Noah, the dog can't stay here. Look how thin he is. He needs food and a warm place." "Then we take him," Noah said simply, "just until we find his person. We can't just take someone's dog. His person is missing, Mommy. Not dead. Missing." Noah's voice had that strange quality again. Too certain, too knowing for a child his age. "Scout has been waiting here every day because someone told him his person was here, but they lied." Sarah's finger hovered over the animal control number on her phone. What Noah was saying made no sense. And yet, there was something about the way Scout was looking at her son. Something about the way the dog had calmed instantly at Noah's touch. "How about we call animal control, but we tell them we can foster Scout until they find his owner," Sarah suggested, compromise seeming like the safest option. "That way he won't go to the shelter." Noah considered this, his hands still gently stroking Scout's wet fur. The dog had stopped crying completely now, his amber eyes fixed on the boy as if he were a miracle. "Scout says that's okay," Noah finally agreed. "But we have to promise to help him find his person." "I promise we'll try," Sarah said, already wondering what she was getting herself into. Her apartment allowed pets, technically, but she'd never considered getting one, not with her work schedule and raising Noah alone. She dialed animal control, explaining the situation as rain continued to pour around them. The daisies for her father lay forgotten on the wet grass. 20 minutes later, a white van with city animal control, emblazoned on the side, pulled up to the cemetery gates. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a rain jacket emerged, carrying a leash and what looked like treats in his pocket. "That's the dog you called about?" the officer asked as he approached, eyeing Scout with professional caution. "German Shepherd, no obvious injuries but malnourished?" "Yes," Sarah nodded. "His name is Scout, according to his tag." The animal control officer, his name tag read Officer Jackson, knelt a safe distance from Scout. "Hey there, big guy. What are you doing out here all alone?" To Sarah's surprise, Scout growled, the first aggressive sound he'd made since Noah touched him. The dog's hackles rose, and he moved slightly, positioning himself between Noah and the officer. "Whoa," Officer Jackson said, standing up slowly. "Has he been aggressive with you?" "No," Sarah replied, puzzled by the sudden change in the dog's demeanor. "He's been gentle with Noah. That's why I thought—" "Scout isn't going to the pound," Noah suddenly shouted, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck. "He says his person isn't dead. Someone took his person." Officer Jackson shot Sarah a concerned look. "Ma'am, I understand your son is attached, but this dog clearly belongs to someone. Our job is to find that someone." I know," Sarah said quickly. "I was hoping we could maybe foster him until you do. We've already formed a connection, and he seems comfortable with us." Jackson studied the odd tableau before him. The thin, rain-soaked German Shepherd, allowing a small boy to cling to him while maintaining a protective stance. "That's unusual," he muttered, almost to himself. "I've seen a lot of dogs in my 15 years on this job, but I've never seen one go from defensive to bonded this quickly." He scratched his chin thoughtfully. "We've had several dogs reported missing in this area over the last month, actually. Purebreds, mostly. Could be part of that situation. So, can we keep him, please?" Noah pleaded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Scout needs us." Officer Jackson sighed. "I'm not supposed to release animals to temporary care without processing them through the shelter first, but—" He looked at Scout again, at the way the dog was simultaneously being protected by and protecting the small boy. "I suppose I could list you as emergency fosters, just until we locate the owner." Relief flooded through Sarah. "Thank you. We'll take good care of him, I promise." "I'll need to scan him for a microchip back at my van," Officer Jackson said. "That's the fastest way to find his owner." Noah's face fell. But Scout says his person is missing. The chip won't help." Jackson exchanged another look with Sarah, who shrugged helplessly. "Let's just check, Noah. It's standard procedure." They walked back to the van together, Scout padding beside Noah as if they'd been companions for years, not minutes. Despite his emaciated state, The German shepherd moved with dignity, occasionally pressing against Noah's side when the boy slipped on the wet grass. At the van, Officer Jackson took out a handheld scanner and ran it over Scout's shoulders and neck. The device beeped, lighting up with a sequence of numbers. "Good news," Jackson said. "He is chipped. Let me run this through the database." He typed the number into a tablet mounted in his van, then frowned at the screen. "That's odd." "What is it?" Sarah asked, pulling Noah closer as the rain began to intensify. "The chip is registered to someone named Thomas Blackwood," Jackson said slowly. "But according to this, Thomas Blackwood died 3 months ago." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by the drumming of rain on the van's roof. "That can't be right," Sarah finally said. "The grave Scout was lying by was fresh. Couldn't have been more than a week old." Jackson nodded, his expression troubled. "And why would a dog whose owner died 3 months ago suddenly show up malnourished at a fresh grave? Something's not adding up." Noah tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "I told you, Mommy. Scout's person isn't dead. His real person is James." Both adults turned to look at the boy. "Noah, how do you know that name?" Sarah asked carefully. Noah pointed to Scout. "He told me. His real person is James. Thomas was James's grandfather." Officer Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Now that's interesting. There's an emergency contact listed on the microchip registration. James Blackwood, grandson, same address as Thomas." Sarah felt that shiver again. The one that had nothing to do with the cold or the rain. How could Noah have known that? "Is there a phone number for James?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Jackson nodded. "I'll try calling now." He dialed the number on his cell phone, putting it on speaker. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "You've reached James Blackwood. Leave a message, and I'll get back to you when I can." Jackson ended the call without leaving a message. "I'll try again later. In the meantime, I think our best option is to let you take Scout home as temporary fosters. I'll file the paperwork when I get back to the office." He handed Sarah a form to sign, then passed her a slip of paper with his direct number. "Call me if you need anything, or if the dog shows any signs of aggression, and I'll call you if I reach James Blackwood." "Thank you," Sarah said, still trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. What had started as a simple cemetery visit had turned into this. "Come on, Noah, let's get Scout home and dry." The drive back to their apartment was oddly quiet. Scout sat in the back seat beside Noah, his wet fur gradually soaking into the upholstery. Sarah would worry about that later. Right now, all she could think about was Noah's inexplicable connection to the dog, and the mystery of why a dog registered to a dead man was mourning at a fresh grave. Their apartment wasn't large, a 2-bedroom in a converted Victorian house downtown, but it was home. Sarah led Scout and Noah inside, grabbing towels from the linen closet to dry them both off. "He's really skinny, Mommy," Noah observed as he helped towel Scout dry. The dog's ribs were clearly visible beneath his fur, his stomach tucked high. "I know, sweetie. We'll feed him, but we need to be careful not to give him too much at once. When dogs are this hungry, they can get sick if they eat too quickly." She found a mixing bowl in the kitchen and filled it with water, which Scout lapped at gratefully. For food, she cooked some plain rice and mixed it with a small amount of chicken breast she'd been planning to use for dinner. When she set the food bowl down, Scout sniffed it but didn't eat. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, more to herself than to the dog. "Aren't you hungry?" Noah knelt beside Scout, whispering something in the dog's ear that Sarah couldn't hear. To her amazement, Scout immediately began to eat, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. "What did you say to him?" Sarah asked. Noah smiled. "I told him it was okay to eat, that we weren't trying to steal him, just help him until we find James." Sarah sat down heavily on a kitchen chair. "Noah, how are you doing this? How do you know what Scout is thinking?" Noah shrugged, the gesture disarmingly casual for such an impossible question. "I don't know. I just hear him. Not like real words, but like feelings and pictures in my head." "And he told you about James? About Thomas being James's grandfather?" Noah nodded. "He showed me James in my head. He has red hair and glasses and a scar on his chin from falling off a bike when he was little." Sarah felt goosebumps rise on her arms. There was no way Noah could know such specific details unless he really was somehow communicating with Scout. "And what happened to James? Why isn't he with Scout?" Noah's face darkened. "Bad men took him. Scout tried to stop them, but they hurt him and threw him out of a car. He's been trying to find James ever since." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Noah, are you saying James was kidnapped? Scout doesn't know that word. He just knows bad men took his person away. This was beyond anything Sarah had expected when she'd agreed to foster an abandoned dog. If what Noah was saying was true, and how could it be, then they were involved in something far more serious than animal rescue. We should call Officer Jackson, she said, reaching for her phone. If James is missing... No, Noah shouted, startling both Sarah and Scout. Scout doesn't trust him. He smelled wrong. Smelled wrong? What does that mean? Like the bad men, Noah said simply. Not exactly the same, but similar. Scout says we can't trust anyone until we find James. Sarah's head was spinning. This was crazy. She was taking the word of her 5-year-old son, who claimed to be communicating telepathically with a dog they'd found less than 2 hours ago. And yet, what if it was true? What if James Blackwood really was missing, possibly in danger? What if Scout really had been trying to find help? Before she could decide what to do, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? She answered cautiously. Ms. Mitchell, this is Officer Jackson. I wanted to update you on the situation with Scout. Sarah tensed, eyeing Noah and the dog, who had both gone very still. Yes? I did some digging, and it turns out James Blackwood was reported missing 2 weeks ago. He didn't show up for work, missed appointments. Police did a welfare check, but found nothing suspicious at his residence. Sarah's heart began to pound. So, Noah was right, she whispered. Excuse me? Nothing, she said quickly. What else do you know? Not much. It's an open missing persons case. But here's where it gets strange. Thomas Blackwood's grave isn't at Evergreen Cemetery. He's buried at Oakwood Memorial on the other side of town. Sarah frowned. Then whose grave was Scout lying beside? That's what I'd like to know, Jackson said, his voice suddenly harder. I'm going to stop by later this evening to check on Scout and ask you a few more questions, if that's all right. Something in his tone made Sarah uneasy. Actually, we're quite tired. Could we do this tomorrow instead? A brief pause. Of course. First thing in the morning, then. Take good care of that dog, Ms. Mitchell. The call ended, and Sarah lowered her phone slowly. He's one of them, Noah said quietly. One of who, Noah? The bad men. Scout says he can smell it now. It's faint, but it's there. Sarah looked at Scout, who was standing alert now, ears forward, completely focused on Noah. The dog didn't look malnourished and sad anymore. He looked dangerous, protective. This is insane, Sarah muttered. We need to call the actual police, not animal control. Noah shook his head fiercely. Scout says no. James tried to tell the police, and that's why the bad men took him. Sarah knelt in front of her son, taking his small shoulders in her hands. Noah, this is very serious. If what you're saying is true, if James really was kidnapped, we need help. We can't handle this alone. We're not alone, Noah said, resting his hand on Scout's head. We have Scout, and Scout can find James. As if to emphasize the point, Scout gave a short, determined bark. Sarah looked between her son and the German shepherd, trying to make sense of the impossible situation. Even if Scout can somehow lead us to James, it's not safe. These bad men you're talking about, they could be dangerous. Real dangerous. That's why we need to hurry, Noah insisted. Scout says James is running out of time. A chill ran through Sarah. What does that mean? Before Noah could answer, there was a knock at the apartment door. Scout immediately tensed, a low growl building in his throat. Ms. Mitchell, it's Officer Jackson. I know I said tomorrow, but something urgent has come up. Noah's eyes widened in fear. He lied. Scout was right. Sarah put a finger to her lips, signaling Noah to be quiet. She moved to the peephole and looked out. It was indeed Officer Jackson, but something about his posture seemed different, tenser, more alert. Just a minute, she called, mind racing. Their apartment was on the second floor. The only exits were the front door, where Jackson stood waiting, and the fire escape outside the kitchen window. She grabbed her purse and car keys, then gestured for Noah and Scout to follow her to the kitchen. As quietly as possible, she opened the window leading to the fire escape. We need to go now, she whispered. Noah, you first. The knocking grew more insistent. Ms. Mitchell, is everything okay in there? Sarah helped Noah through the window, then signaled for Scout to follow. The German shepherd hesitated for only a second before leaping gracefully onto the fire escape. Ms. Mitchell, I need you to open this door right now. Jackson's voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. Sarah climbed through the window just as she heard a loud thud against the apartment door. He was trying to break it down. Her heart pounding, she helped Noah down the fire escape stairs, Scout leading the way. They reached the bottom just as the sound of splintering wood echoed from above. Sarah lifted Noah into her arms and ran for her car, parked half a block away. Scout kept pace beside them, no longer seeming weak or exhausted. "Get in, quick!" Sarah gasped as she unlocked the car with shaking hands. Noah scrambled into the back seat, and Scout jumped in after him. Sarah slid behind the wheel, just as she spotted Jackson emerging from the fire escape, talking urgently into what looked like a radio. She started the engine and pulled away from the curb, trying not to speed too obviously. In the rearview mirror, she saw Jackson running toward a vehicle of his own, not the animal control van, but a dark sedan. "Where do we go?" Sarah asked, hands trembling on the steering wheel. "Noah, where does Scout say James is?" Noah closed his eyes, his hand buried in Scout's fur. "He doesn't know exactly, but he can follow his scent. Scout says to go east, toward the old factory district." Sarah took a deep breath, made a quick turn to make sure Jackson wasn't right behind them, and headed east. "I can't believe we're doing this," she muttered. "I can't believe I'm following directions from a dog." But as she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Noah whispering to Scout, the German shepherd's intelligent eyes fixed on her son with absolute trust, she knew she had no choice. Something impossible was happening, and somehow she and her 5-year-old son were right in the middle of it. Whatever danger awaited them, one thing was clear. Scout was no ordinary dog, and whatever connection he shared with Noah might be their only hope of finding James Blackwood alive. The dark sedan was still visible in Sarah's rearview mirror as she navigated the evening traffic. Noah sat quietly in the back seat, one arm wrapped around Scout's neck, his eyes closed in concentration. "He's getting closer," Noah whispered suddenly. "Turn right at the next light." Sarah obeyed, her mind still struggling to process everything that had happened. Less than 3 hours ago, she'd been a normal single mother, taking her son to visit his grandfather's grave. Now she was fleeing from a fake animal control officer, following directions from a dog who supposedly communicated telepathically with her 5-year-old son. "Noah, we need to find somewhere safe," she said, checking the mirror again. The sedan seemed to have disappeared, but she couldn't be sure. "We need to think this through." "Dr. Rivera," Noah said without opening his eyes. "Scout says we should go to Dr. Rivera." "Who's Dr. Rivera?" "James's friend, an animal doctor. Scout trusts her." Sarah racked her brain, trying to remember if she knew any veterinarians named Rivera. "Do you know where she works? How to find her?" Noah's eyes snapped open. "The Blue Creek Animal Hospital. Scout says it's on Maple Street." Sarah pulled over to check her phone's map app. Sure enough, Blue Creek Animal Hospital was located on Maple Street, about 15 minutes from their current location. She hesitated. Driving straight there might be dangerous if Jackson was indeed following them. But they needed help, and a veterinarian would at least be able to check Scout for injuries they might have missed. "Okay," she decided. "But if anything seems wrong when we get there, we leave immediately. Understand?" Noah nodded solemnly. "Scout says Dr. Rivera is good. She helped him and James before." The Blue Creek Animal Hospital was a small, modern building nestled between a coffee shop and a laundromat. The lights were still on despite the late hour, the open sign glowing in the window. Sarah parked in the back, away from street view. "Wait here," she told Noah. "I'll make sure it's safe first." "No," Noah protested. "We stay together. Scout says so." Sarah sighed. She wasn't used to her usually compliant son being so assertive. "Fine, but stay close to me." The three of them approached the clinic's back entrance cautiously. Through the window, Sarah could see a woman in scrubs working at a computer. She had dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, with striking features and intense focus as she typed. Sarah knocked gently on the door. The woman looked up, startled, then narrowed her eyes when she spotted Scout. After a moment's hesitation, she approached the door. "We're closed for non-emergencies," she said through the glass, but her eyes never left the German shepherd. "Please," Sarah said. "Are you Dr. Rivera? We need help. It's about James Blackwood." The veterinarian's expression changed instantly. She unlocked the door, ushering them inside quickly, then locked it behind them and pulled down the blinds. "How do you know James?" she demanded, her voice tense. "And why do you have Scout?" Before Sarah could answer, Noah stepped forward. "Scout found us at the cemetery. He says bad men took James away and you're the only one who can help us." Dr. Rivera stared at Noah, then at Scout, who had positioned himself protectively beside the boy. "What's your name?" she asked, kneeling to Noah's level. "Noah Mitchell, this is my mom, Sarah." Dr. Rivera, her name tag read Elena Rivera, DVM, stood slowly, her eyes never leaving Scout. "He found you at a cemetery? Which one?" "Evergreen," Sarah replied. "He was lying beside a fresh grave with no headstone. According to Animal Control, he's registered to Thomas Blackwood, who died 3 months ago." "Thomas was James's grandfather," Dr. Rivera confirmed. She reached out tentatively, allowing Scout to sniff her hand before she stroked his head. "But you're right. He's buried at Oakwood, not Evergreen." She led them into an examination room, closing the door behind them. "James has been missing for 2 weeks. The police say he probably just took off, but I knew something was wrong when Scout disappeared too. James would never abandon him." "The animal control officer who scanned Scout's microchip," Sarah said. "He seemed helpful at first, but then something changed. He tried to break into our apartment. We barely escaped." Dr. Rivera's expression darkened. "Describe him." "Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair starting to gray at the temples. His name tag said Officer Jackson." "That's not a real animal control officer," Dr. Rivera said grimly. "The city doesn't have anyone by that name working for them." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Then who was he?" "I think he works for North Star Breeding Enterprises," Dr. Rivera said, moving to examine a Scout more carefully. "That's where James was working before he disappeared. He was a veterinary assistant there while finishing his degree." "Why would someone from a breeding company kidnap James and chase us?" Sarah asked, watching as Dr. Rivera gently parted Scout's fur, checking for injuries. "Because North Star isn't just breeding dogs," Dr. Rivera said quietly. "James discovered they were doing something else, something illegal. He was gathering evidence when he vanished." Noah, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Scout has something inside him, something the bad men put there." Both women turned to look at the boy. "What do you mean, Noah?" Sarah asked. Noah placed his hand on Scout's side, just behind the rib cage. "Here, it hurts him sometimes. The bad men put it there before James rescued him." Dr. Rivera's eyes widened. She immediately focused on the area Noah had indicated, her fingers probing gently. Scout whined but didn't move away. "There's a small scar here," she murmured. "It's healed, but..." She reached for a handheld ultrasound device. "Let me check." Sarah watched as the veterinarian ran the ultrasound wand over Scout's flank. The image on the small screen was meaningless to her, but Dr. Rivera's sharp intake of breath spoke volumes. "There's something there," she confirmed. "A small foreign object, maybe 2 centimeters long. It's not a typical microchip. It's larger and in an unusual location." "What is it?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," Dr. Rivera admitted. "But if what James suspected about North Star is true, this could be part of it." "Can you take it out?" Noah asked. Dr. Rivera hesitated. "I could, but it would require surgery. Scout would need anesthesia and recovery time, and without knowing what this device is..." "It's how they're tracking him," Noah said with certainty. "Scout says they always know where the dogs are because of the things inside them." Sarah exchanged a look with Dr. Rivera. "Noah has some kind of connection with Scout. He seems to understand him in ways I can't explain." The veterinarian studied Noah thoughtfully. James mentioned something similar. He said Scout was special, more intelligent, more intuitive than any dog he'd ever worked with. That's part of why he rescued him from North Star. "Rescued?" Sarah repeated. James found evidence that North Star was experimenting on dogs, using them for something beyond breeding. He managed to smuggle Scout out before they could... She trailed off, glancing at Noah. "Before they could hurt him." Scout nudged Noah's hand, and the boy nodded as if responding to an unspoken question. "Scout says we need to find James tonight. The bad men are moving him to another place tomorrow." "How could Scout possibly know that?" Sarah asked, her patience wearing thin. As much as she wanted to believe her son's uncanny ability, this was stretching credulity too far. Dr. Rivera didn't seem so skeptical. The device inside him, it could be receiving information as well as transmitting, like a two-way radio or cellular device. "That's impossible," Sarah protested. "Isn't it? 5 years ago, I would have said yes, but the technology North Star has been developing..." Dr. Rivera shook her head. "James showed me some of their research. They're decades ahead of anything being publicly disclosed. A sudden banging at the front door made them all jump. Through the small window in the examination room, they could see the silhouette of a large man. "It's him," Sarah whispered. "Officer Jackson." Dr. Rivera quickly turned off the lights in the examination room. "There's a back exit through the kennel area. My car is parked there, a blue Honda. Take these." She pressed her keys into Sarah's hand. "I'll delay him." "What about you?" Sarah asked. "I'll tell him I haven't seen you, that I'm just working late. Now go, quickly." Sarah took Noah's hand, and Scout led the way through the darkened clinic to the kennel area. Most of the cages were empty, but a few contained sleeping animals, a couple of cats, a small terrier recovering from surgery, a rabbit in a special enclosure. They had just reached the back door when they heard the clinic's front door open, followed by Dr. Rivera's voice, artificially bright but with an undercurrent of tension. "Can I help you? We're closed for non-emergencies." "Animal control," Jackson's voice carried clearly through the quiet building. "I'm looking for a German Shepherd that was reported stolen earlier today. I have reason to believe the people who took him might have brought him here." Sarah pushed the back door open slowly, wincing when it creaked. She ushered Noah and Scout outside into the small parking area where a single blue Honda sat waiting. "The people you're looking for," they heard Dr. Rivera say, her voice fading as they moved away from the building. "What did they look like?" Sarah unlocked the Honda and opened the back door for Noah and Scout, then slipped into the driver's seat. The keys trembled in her hand as she started the engine, trying to be as quiet as possible. She backed out slowly, headlights off, navigating by the dim glow of the dashboard. Only when they were a block away did she switch on the lights and allow herself to breathe. "Where now?" she asked, glancing at Noah in the rearview mirror. Noah had his eyes closed again, one hand buried in Scout's fur. "The old factory," he said after a moment. "By the river. That's where they're keeping James." Sarah checked the time, almost 10 p.m. The industrial district by the river would be deserted at this hour, which was both good and bad. Good because they wouldn't endanger bystanders. Bad because there would be no one to help if they ran into trouble. "We should call the police," she said. "No." Noah's voice was unexpectedly sharp. "Scout says they have police too. That's why James couldn't get help." Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Noah, this is crazy. We're not detectives or secret agents. We're a preschool teacher and a 5-year-old boy." "And Scout," Noah added firmly. "Scout can find James. He has to." Sarah drove in silence for several minutes, weighing their options. Going to the river district alone was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but if what Noah and Dr. Rivera said was true, if North Star really had infiltrated the police and animal control, who could they trust? Her phone rang, displaying Dr. Rivera's number. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "He's gone," Dr. Rivera said, her voice hushed and urgent. "I convinced him I hadn't seen you, but he didn't believe me. He's searching the area. Where are you?" "Heading toward the river district," Sarah replied. "Noah says that's where they're keeping James." "The old textile factory," Dr. Rivera said immediately. "North Star bought it last year, supposedly for storage. That has to be it." "What exactly is North Star doing?" Sarah asked. "Why would they kidnap James? Why are they after Scout?" Dr. Rivera hesitated. James discovered they were using dogs to transport something, surgical implants, like the one in Scout. He didn't know exactly what they were moving, but it was valuable enough to kill for. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "And now they're after us because we have Scout." "Not just because you have Scout," Dr. Rivera corrected. "Because Scout has whatever they implanted in him, and because your son can apparently communicate with him. They'll want to know how that's possible." Sarah glanced at Noah in the mirror. He was whispering to Scout, their foreheads almost touching. The image would have been sweet under any other circumstances. "What should we do?" she asked. "I'm on my way to the factory now," Dr. Rivera said. "Don't go in alone. Wait for me. I have James's research. It might help us understand what we're dealing with." "Okay," Sarah agreed. "We'll park somewhere with a view of the building and wait." She ended the call and focused on driving, following Noah's occasional directions as Scout guided them toward the river district. The streets grew darker and less maintained, potholes jarring them as they entered the industrial zone. Most of the buildings were dark, abandoned or closed for the night, their hulking silhouettes looming against the cloudy sky. There, Noah pointed to a massive structure ahead, the old textile factory, its brick facade weathered by decades of river mist and neglect. Unlike the surrounding buildings, this one showed signs of recent renovation. New security lights illuminated the perimeter, and a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire surrounded the property. Sarah parked on a side street with a clear view of the factory's main entrance, where a guard booth stood occupied. Even from this distance, she could see someone inside, monitoring screens. "Now we wait for Dr. Rivera," she said, turning to face Noah and Scout in the back seat. "No one gets out of this car until she arrives. Understand?" Noah nodded, but his attention was fixed on the factory. "James is in there," he whispered. "Scout can feel him." As if to confirm, Scout whined softly, his ears pricked forward, body tense and alert. Is he okay?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the question. She was actually asking her son to relay information from a dog about a man neither of them had ever met. Noah closed his eyes briefly. "He's alive," he said finally, "but scared and hurt. They did something to him, too." Sarah was about to ask what Noah meant when a pair of headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. A vehicle was approaching slowly, its lights dimmed. She tensed, ready to start the engine and flee if necessary, but relaxed when she recognized Dr. Rivera's face behind the wheel of her own car. The veterinarian parked behind them and quickly transferred to their borrowed Honda, sliding into the passenger seat with a backpack clutched in her hands. "I brought James's research," she said, breathless, "and medical supplies in case we need them." "How are we going to get past that guard?" Sarah asked, nodding toward the factory entrance. Dr. Rivera unzipped the backpack and withdrew a folder, flipping it open to reveal ID badges. James kept these when he left North Star, employee access cards, his and another researcher who quit around the same time. Won't they have deactivated them? Probably the main ones, but James said the secondary access points use a different system that rarely gets updated. There's a delivery entrance on the east side that might work. Sarah studied Dr. Rivera's determined expression. "You care about James a lot, don't you?" A flush crept up the veterinarian's neck. He's a former colleague, and he was right about North Star. Someone needs to expose what they're doing. Before Sarah could respond, Noah gasped, pressing his face to the window. "Someone's taking James out of the building!" They all turned to look. Sure enough, a side door had opened, and two men were half carrying, half dragging a third figure between them. Even from this distance, they could see the third person was struggling weakly. "It's him," Dr. Rivera confirmed, her voice tight with emotion. "That's James." They watched as the men loaded James into a waiting van, its engine already running. "They're moving him now," Sarah realized with horror. "Not tomorrow, tonight." Scout barked sharply, pawing at the door. "We have to follow them," Dr. Rivera said. "If they take him to another facility, we might never find him again." Sarah started the engine, her heart pounding. "What about the guard?" "They're leaving through a different exit," Dr. Rivera pointed to the van, which was now moving toward a gate on the far side of the property. "We can follow at a distance." The van pulled out onto a service road that ran parallel to the river. Sarah waited until it was several hundred yards ahead before pulling out to follow, keeping her headlights dimmed. "If we can get James away from them," Dr. Rivera said, rifling through her medical bag, "I brought sedatives that should work on the men if necessary, and tools to remove the implant from Scout." "And then what?" Sarah asked. "Even if we rescue James, where do we go? Who do we tell? If North Star has people in the police?"
"James has a contact in the FBI," Dr. Rivera replied. "He was building a case for them when he disappeared. I have the agent's number in my phone."
The van ahead turned onto a narrower road that wound deeper into the industrial zone, away from the river. The buildings here were older, many of them completely abandoned, windows broken and walls covered in graffiti. "Where are they taking him?" Sarah wondered aloud. Noah leaned forward between the front seats. "Scout says there's another place, a small building where they do the surgeries. It's hidden." As if confirming Noah's words, the van slowed and turned into what appeared to be a dilapidated warehouse. Unlike the textile factory, this building had no visible security, no lights, nothing to suggest it was in use. The perfect cover. Sarah drove past slowly, then parked around the corner, out of sight from the warehouse entrance. "What now?" she asked, looking between Dr. Rivera and Noah. "We can't just walk in there." "No," Dr. Rivera agreed, "but Scout can." Noah's eyes widened. "You want to send Scout in alone?" "Not exactly." Dr. Rivera reached into her backpack and pulled out a small device. "This is a tracking collar with a camera. James was developing it for wildlife research. If we put it on Scout, we can see what he sees and know exactly where he is. But how would that help? Sarah asked. Even if Scout finds James, he can't free him. No, but he can find the least guarded entrance, Dr. Rivera explained, and create a distraction if necessary. These men know Scout is valuable to them. They won't hurt him if they can help it. Noah shook his head vigorously. Scout doesn't want to leave me. He says we need to stay together. Sarah looked at her son's determined face, then at Scout's intelligent eyes. Noah, sometimes being brave means letting others help in the way they can best help. Scout is strong and fast, and those men want him alive. He has the best chance of getting in and out safely. Noah's lower lip trembled. What if they catch him? Then we'll know exactly where he is because of the tracker, Dr. Rivera said gently. And we'll come for him, just like we're coming for James. Noah buried his face in Scout's fur, whispering something only the dog could hear. After a long moment, he looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. Scout says he'll do it, for James. Dr. Rivera fastened the specialized collar around Scout's neck, checking to make sure the camera was secure and the tracking device was functioning. On her phone, a map appeared with a blinking dot representing Scout's position. The camera will transmit to this, she said, handing Noah a small tablet. You'll be able to see everything Scout sees. Sarah helped them open the car door, and Scout slipped out into the darkness. For a moment, he stood looking back at Noah, as if memorizing the boy's face. Then he turned and trotted silently toward the warehouse, a shadow moving among shadows. Noah watched the tablet screen intently as Scout's view bounced with each step. The night vision camera turned everything a ghostly green, but the image was clear enough to follow Scout's progress. They saw him approach the warehouse, nose to the ground, tracking scents only he could detect. Scout circled the building once, investigating each entrance. The main doors were guarded by a single man smoking a cigarette, but a small side door appeared unattended. Scout approached it cautiously, sniffing along its edge. It's locked, Dr. Rivera observed as they watched Scout paw at the door. Just then, Scout's head turned sharply. On the tablet screen, they could see a figure approaching, another guard making rounds. Scout pressed himself against the wall, almost invisible in the shadows, as the guard passed within feet of him. Once the man was gone, Scout continued his reconnaissance. He's so smart, Noah whispered proudly. He knows exactly what to do. Scout made his way to the back of the warehouse, where a loading dock stood with its large door partially open, just enough for a dog to slip through. Without hesitation, Scout squeezed under the gap and entered the building. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit and divided into sections by temporary walls. Scout moved cautiously, staying close to the shadows. They could hear voices now, coming through the tablet's speaker. Sure this place is secure? After what happened at the main facility, we can't take chances. It's fine. No one knows about this location except the core team. And once the extraction is complete, it won't matter anyway. Scout crept forward, following the voices. The camera showed a makeshift surgical suite, clean and modern equipment that looked jarringly out of place in the decrepit warehouse. 2 men in lab coats were preparing instruments, while a third stood watch over a figure strapped to a table. James, Dr. Rivera breathed, leaning closer to the tablet. The man on the table was pale and disheveled, with unkempt red hair. A bruise darkened one side of his face, and he appeared to be only semi-conscious, his head lolling to one side. Why can't we just cut it out of him? One of the lab coats was saying. We know where it is. Because the prototype integrated with his neural tissue, the other replied impatiently. Cut it out wrong and you destroy both. The boss wants the technology intact. Scout had worked his way behind some equipment, watching the men from a concealed position. His breathing was steady, his movements deliberate and cautious. What are they talking about? Sarah whispered. What did they put inside James? I think... Dr. Rivera hesitated. I think the same thing they put in Scout, but more advanced. Some kind of neural interface. That's what James was investigating when he disappeared. On the screen they saw one of the men approach James with a syringe. This will keep him compliant for the transport. We move out in 20 minutes. As the man bent over James, Scout made his decision. With a snarl that needed no translation, he burst from his hiding place and launched himself at the man with the syringe. Scout, no, Noah cried, but it was too late. Chaos erupted on the tablet screen. Scout had the man's arm in his jaws, the syringe clattering to the floor. The other men shouted in surprise and fear. James, roused by the commotion, lifted his head, eyes widening at the sight of his dog. "Scout?" His voice was weak but clear on the audio. "How did you—" One of the other men grabbed what looked like a cattle prod, lunging for Scout. The German shepherd released his first target and dodged the electrical device, circling to position himself between the men and James. "Careful," one of them shouted. "Don't damage the dog. The implant's still active." Scout continued to snarl and lunge, keeping the men at bay while looking for an opportunity to free James. But he was outnumbered, and the men were gradually cornering him. "We have to help him," Noah said, tears streaming down his face. "They're going to hurt Scout." Dr. Rivera was already retrieving something else from her backpack, a small dart gun. "Tranquilizer darts," she explained grimly, "enough to knock a man out for an hour." Sarah looked between the tablet, showing Scout's increasingly desperate situation, and her son's terrified face. "This is insane," she muttered. "We should call for help." "There's no time," Dr. Rivera said, checking the dart gun, "and no one we can trust. It's just us." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, then made her decision. "Noah, you stay in the car. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone except me or Dr. Rivera. Understand?" Noah nodded, clutching the tablet like a lifeline. "Save Scout," he pleaded. "Save James." Sarah looked at Dr. Rivera, who handed her a spare dart. "Just in case," the veterinarian said, "aim for a large muscle mass, thigh or shoulder, and stay behind me. I've had training." With a final glance at Noah, Sarah followed Dr. Rivera into the darkness, toward the warehouse where Scout was fighting for his life, and for James's. Would they reach Scout in time, or had they just walked into a trap? One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same after tonight. The loading dock door was still partially open, just as they had seen on Scout's camera feed. Sarah followed Dr. Rivera, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give them away. The tranquilizer dart felt awkward in her hand. She'd never held a weapon before, let alone used one against another human being. "Stay low," Dr. Rivera whispered, crouching as she slipped under the door. "And quiet." Sarah nodded, following the veterinarian into the dimly lit warehouse. The sounds of struggle echoed from deeper within, barking, shouting, the crash of equipment being knocked over. Scout was still fighting. They moved behind stacks of crates, Dr. Rivera, leading with the dart gun held ready. Sarah couldn't help but wonder at the transformation in the veterinarian. Gone was the professional calm, replaced by a fierce determination that bordered on dangerous. The makeshift surgical area came into view, now in disarray. One man lay unconscious on the floor, blood seeping from a bite wound on his arm. The other two were cornering Scout, who stood protectively in front of James, still strapped to the table. One man held the cattle prod, while the other was attempting to loop a catch pole around Scout's neck. "I'll take the one with the cattle prod," Dr. Rivera breathed. "You stay here until I call you." Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Rivera had moved forward, taking aim with practiced precision. The dart found its mark in the man's thigh. He cried out, slapping at the spot as if stung by an insect, then stared in confusion at the small dart in his hand, before his eyes rolled back and he crumpled to the floor. The remaining man spun around, abandoning his attempt to capture Scout. "What the—" Dr. Rivera was already reloading, but the man lunged for her, knocking the dart gun from her hands. They grappled, falling against a tray of surgical instruments that clattered to the floor. "Sarah!" Dr. Rivera shouted. "Get James!" Sarah rushed forward, skirting the struggling pair. Scout recognized her immediately, giving a short bark of relief before turning his attention back to the fight. James Blackwood's eyes were glassy but alert, darting between Sarah and Scout in confusion. Who are you?" he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "A friend," Sarah said simply, working at the restraints that bound his wrists. They were medical-grade straps with complicated buckles. "I'm here with Dr. Rivera and Scout." Understanding dawned in James's eyes. "Elena is here?" He tried to lift his head, wincing with the effort. "How did you find me?" "Your dog found us," Sarah replied, finally freeing one of his wrists. "And my son, he can understand Scout somehow. They led us to you." Behind them, Dr. Rivera cried out in pain. The man had her pinned against a wall, his forearm pressed against her throat. Without hesitation, Scout abandoned his post by the table and launched himself at the attacker, teeth finding purchase in the man's calf. He howled, releasing Dr. Rivera to deal with the new threat. Sarah worked frantically at the remaining restraints. James was trying to help now, his movements weak but determined. Finally, the last strap came free. "Can you walk?" Sarah asked, helping James to sit up. He swayed, bracing himself against the table. "I think so. They've been drugging me, but it's wearing off." Across the room, Dr. Rivera had recovered the dart gun and was taking aim at the man still struggling with Scout. The dart struck true, embedding in the man's shoulder. He staggered, releasing his grip on Scout's scruff, then slumped to the floor. Dr. Rivera rushed to James, her professional demeanor momentarily abandoned as she threw her arms around him. "I thought we'd lost you," she whispered. James returned the embrace weakly. "I knew you'd figure it out. Did you contact Agent Morales?" "Not yet," Dr. Rivera replied, already examining him for injuries. "We came straight here after finding Scout." "We need to go," Sarah urged, glancing nervously at the unconscious men. "The guard outside will notice something's wrong sooner or later." James nodded, sliding carefully off the table. His legs buckled immediately, and Dr. Rivera caught him, supporting his weight. "The bastards did something to me," he muttered. "Some kind of experimental neural implant, like the ones they were putting in the dogs, but more advanced." Scout pressed against James's leg, whining softly. The man's free hand found the dog's head, scratching behind his ears with obvious affection. "Good boy, Scout. The best boy." Together they made their way toward the loading dock door, James leaning heavily on Dr. Rivera. Sarah led the way, dart in hand, ready for any sign of the external guard. Scout moved alongside James, occasionally looking back toward the door as if expecting pursuit. They had almost reached the exit when James stumbled, a cry of pain escaping him. He clutched at his head, his face contorted in agony. "James!" Dr. Rivera eased him to the floor, supporting his head as a seizure racked his body. "James, what's happening?" "The implant," he gasped between spasms. "They can activate it remotely. Pain, stimulus." Scout began to whine, pacing anxiously around James. Then, without warning, the German shepherd yelped and fell to his side, his body convulsing in a mirror of his owner's distress. "Scout!" Sarah knelt beside the dog, helpless to ease his suffering. "What's happening to him?" "The implants," Dr. Rivera said grimly, her hands steady as she administered something from her medical bag to James. "They must be linked somehow, or controlled by the same signal." The loading dock door suddenly rolled up completely, flooding the area with harsh light. Silhouetted against the glare was a tall, elegant figure, a woman in a tailored suit, her silver hair cut in a severe bob. She held what looked like a small remote control in her manicured hand. "Fascinating, isn't it?" she said, stepping into the warehouse. Behind her, 2 armed security guards took position. "The neural link works even better than our models predicted. Man and beast, connected by technology. The perfect symbiotic relationship." Dr. Rivera stood, positioning herself between the newcomer and James. "Dr. Keller, I should have known you were behind this." The silver-haired woman smiled thinly. "Dr. Rivera, James spoke of you often during our conversations. He seemed to think you'd help expose our operation." She clicked her tongue. Disappointing to see such a promising veterinarian throw away her career for sentimentality. Sarah helped James to a sitting position as the seizure subsided. Scout, too, was recovering, struggling to his feet with a determination that seemed almost human. The dog positioned himself protectively in front of Noah's son, who remained crouched beside James. "What exactly is your operation?" Sarah asked, buying time, her mind racing to find a way out of this situation. "What are you doing to these dogs? To people?" Dr. Keller regarded her with cold curiosity. "And you are?" "Someone who knows you're kidnapping people and experimenting on animals," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Someone who's going to make sure everyone else knows, too." "Brave words from a woman cornered with no escape," Dr. Keller observed mildly. She turned her attention back to Dr. Rivera. "Since you're all so curious, and since none of you will be sharing this information outside these walls, I may as well satisfy your curiosity." She paced slowly around them, the remote still held casually in her hand, a constant threat. Imagine a world where drugs, sensitive information, even biological samples could be transported without detection. No customs inspections, no border controls, no questions. Just a dog, man's best friend, walking where it pleases, carrying our cargo inside its body, programmed to return to its handler. You're using dogs as smugglers, Dr. Rivera said flatly. Couriers, Dr. Keller corrected. Highly specialized, neurologically enhanced couriers. The implant does more than just store cargo. It conditions the animal, controls its behavior, ensures compliance. And with James's breakthrough, we've developed a human interface as well. She smiled at James, who glared back with undisguised hatred. Your work on interspecies neural communication was truly groundbreaking, James. A shame you developed such inconvenient ethics. You're monsters, James spat. Those dogs suffered, died. Acceptable losses in pursuit of progress, Dr. Keller dismissed. To the guards, she said, secure them. The boy in the car, too. We'll transfer them to the primary facility for processing. Sarah felt ice flood her veins. Boy? What boy? Dr. Keller raised an eyebrow. Did you think we wouldn't notice the child watching from your vehicle? One of my men has already retrieved him. Quite a special child, from what I understand. Able to interpret the neural output from our canine subjects. He'll make an excellent research subject. No! Sarah lunged forward, only to be roughly restrained by one of the guards. If you've touched my son... Your son is unharmed, Dr. Keller assured her coldly. For now, his cooperation will determine whether that remains the case. Scout began to growl, a low, dangerous sound that seemed to vibrate through the warehouse. The dog's posture had changed, hackles raised, body tense with readiness. Even in his weakened state, James seemed to respond to the change, sitting straighter, eyes more focused. You've underestimated something, Victoria, James said, his voice stronger now. The link goes both ways. Dr. Keller frowned. What are you talking about? Scout isn't just receiving from the implant, James explained, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. He's transmitting, and so am I. As if on cue, the lights in the warehouse flickered, then went out completely, plunging the space into darkness. In the moment of confusion, Scout moved, a shadow among shadows, targeting the guard holding Sarah. The man cried out as teeth found his arm, his grip loosening enough for Sarah to break free. James somehow found the strength to lunge at Dr. Keller, knocking the remote from her hand. It skittered across the floor, disappearing into the darkness. Dr. Rivera, taking advantage of the chaos, retrieved her dart gun and fired at the second guard, who collapsed with a muffled curse. "The car!" James shouted. "Scout, find Noah!" The German Shepherd didn't need to be told twice. He bolted for the open loading dock, Sarah close behind him. Dr. Rivera helped James to his feet, and together they stumbled after them, leaving Dr. Keller scrambling for her lost remote in the darkness. Outside, the night air was cool against Sarah's flushed face. She scanned the area frantically, looking for any sign of Noah or the man who had taken him. Scout was already racing toward the Honda, which still sat where they had left it, but the door was open, the interior light illuminating the empty back seat. "Noah!" Sarah screamed, her voice echoing off the abandoned buildings. "Noah!" Scout skidded to a stop, nose to the ground, tracking a scent. He barked once, sharply, then took off toward a narrow alley between warehouses. Sarah followed without hesitation, her fear for Noah overwhelming any sense of self-preservation. The alley was dark, littered with debris and decades of neglect. Scout moved confidently ahead, his pale fur visible even in the dim light. He led Sarah to a chain door, where he began to dig furiously at the ground. Sarah didn't understand until she knelt beside him and saw the small drainage grate and heard the muffled crying coming from below. "Noah?" she called, her voice breaking. "Noah, are you down there?" "Mommy!" His voice was small and frightened, but unmistakably his. "The bad man put me down here. I can't get out."
Sarah pulled at the grate, but it was secured with a heavy padlock. "Hold on, sweetie! I'm going to get you out!"
Scout was already racing back toward the warehouse. Minutes later, he returned with James and Dr. Rivera in tow. James held a bolt cutter, likely part of the warehouse's maintenance equipment. "Stand back," James instructed, fitting the tool around the padlock. Despite his weakened state, he managed to apply enough pressure to snap the lock. Together they lifted the grate, revealing a small drainage cistern about 6 feet deep. Noah stood in water up to his ankles, his face streaked with tears but otherwise unharmed. Scout barked excitedly, pacing around the opening as Sarah reached down to lift her son to safety. "Scout found you," Noah said as soon as he was in his mother's arms, his small body trembling with cold and fear. "He told me to stay quiet until you came." "We need to move," Dr. Rivera urged, glancing back toward the warehouse. Keller will have called for backup by now. James nodded, swaying slightly as he fought against exhaustion and the after effects of whatever they had done to him. My contact in the FBI, Agent Morales. We need to reach him. They made their way back to the Honda, moving as quickly as James's condition would allow. Scout stayed close to Noah, occasionally looking back the way they had come, alert for pursuit. Where do we go? Sarah asked as they piled into the vehicle. Noah and Scout in the back, James in the passenger seat beside her, with Dr. Rivera squeezed in beside Noah. There's a safe house, James said, his words slurring slightly as exhaustion caught up with him. Agent Morales set it up when I first brought him evidence about North Star. Head north toward the mountains. As Sarah started the engine, headlights appeared at the warehouse exit, a black SUV emerging into the night. They're coming, Dr. Rivera warned, already on her phone, dialing a number James had given her. Drive, now. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She pulled away from the curb, taking a different route than the one they had arrived by. In the rearview mirror, she could see the SUV turn in their direction, its powerful engine roaring to life. Agent Morales? Dr. Rivera spoke urgently into her phone. This is Elena Rivera. I'm with James Blackwood. He's alive, but we need extraction immediately. North Star is in pursuit. She listened for a moment, then rattled off their location and heading. Understood. We'll try to lose them until then. What did he say? James asked, fighting to stay conscious. He has a team in the area, Dr. Rivera replied. They've been monitoring North Star for weeks, waiting for evidence. He's directed us to a rendezvous point about 20 minutes from here. We need to lose that SUV first, Sarah observed, glancing again at the mirror. The vehicle was gaining on them. The Honda was no match for its power. Turn left at the next intersection, Noah suddenly instructed from the back seat. Scout says there's a way to trick them. Sarah hesitated only briefly before following her son's direction. The Honda swerved onto a narrower street, lined with abandoned storefronts and decaying apartment buildings. Now right, Noah continued, his voice taking on that strange, certain quality. Into the old parking garage. Sarah spotted the entrance, a crumbling concrete structure, its gate long since removed. She pulled in, driving up to the second level before cutting the lights. Stop here, Noah said. Turn the car around. Be ready. The SUV's headlights swept the entrance below, then began to ascend the ramp. Sarah's hands tightened on the wheel, every instinct screaming at her to flee. Wait, Noah whispered, his hand buried in Scout's fur. Wait until they pass this level. Now! Sarah switched on the headlights and floored the accelerator. The Honda shot down a different ramp than the one the SUV was climbing, catching their pursuers completely by surprise. By the time the larger vehicle had managed to turn around, they were already back on the street, heading in the opposite direction. How did you know that would work? Dr. Rivera asked, staring at Noah with newfound respect. Noah shrugged. Scout showed me. He can see the whole building in his head, like a map, and he knows how those men think. James turned in his seat, studying Noah with intense interest despite his exhaustion. The neural link, he murmured. It's not just between me and Scout. He's somehow broadcasting to your son, too. Is that even possible? Sarah asked, dividing her attention between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, where the SUV was once again visible, though further behind now. Theoretically, no, James admitted, but Scout isn't an ordinary dog. He was the first successful subject in North Star's program, the template for all that followed. His neural architecture is unique. Take the next right, Dr. Rivera instructed, eyes on her phone's map. The rendezvous point is an abandoned fire station about 10 minutes from here. Sarah followed the directions, pushing the Honda as fast as she dared through the empty streets. The SUV remained in pursuit, but they had gained some distance thanks to Noah and Scout's unexpected strategy. There, Dr. Rivera pointed to a building ahead, a brick structure with boarded-up windows and faded lettering that once spelled Fire Station 22. As they pulled into the station's empty apparatus bay, Sarah was relieved to see two unmarked black sedans already waiting. Men and women in tactical gear emerged, weapons ready but not pointed directly at them. A tall, broad-shouldered man with close-cropped hair approached as they exited the Honda. James Blackwood? He asked, his voice gravelly but not unkind. James nodded weakly, still leaning heavily on Dr. Rivera. Agent Morales, told you I'd find proof. That you did, Morales agreed, signaling for the medic on his team. Let's get you all to safety before we debrief. North Star's people aren't far behind. As if to punctuate his words, the SUV that had been pursuing them screeched to a halt outside the station. Before its occupants could emerge, Morales' team had surrounded it, weapons drawn. "Federal agents," Morales shouted. "Step out of the vehicle with your hands visible." The driver and passenger complied, their faces masks of fury as they were handcuffed and led away. Dr. Keller was not among them. She had sent underlings to do her dirty work. "We need to get the implants out," James said urgently as the medic helped him toward one of the sedans. "Mine and Scout's. They're still active. Keller can track us, maybe even control us again." "We've got a surgical team standing by at the safe house," Morales assured him. "Your research gave us everything we needed to understand the technology. We'll remove them safely." Noah, who had been clinging to Sarah's side, suddenly knelt beside Scout. The dog whined softly, pushing his nose against the boy's chest. "Scout says thank you," Noah said, looking up at the adults, "for saving James, and for believing in him." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. Whatever inexplicable bond her son shared with this extraordinary dog, it had led them through this impossible night, had saved lives, exposed criminals, and united them all in a way she could never have imagined when she woke up that morning. As they were ushered into the waiting vehicles, Noah, Sarah, and Scout in one, James, Dr. Rivera, and the medic in another, Sarah caught a glimpse of her son whispering one last thing to Scout. The German shepherd's tail wagged once, his intelligent eyes fixed on Noah with unmistakable understanding. "What did you tell him?" Sarah asked as they pulled away from the fire station, a convoy of FBI vehicles surrounding them protectively. Noah smiled, the innocent smile of a 5-year-old that somehow held wisdom beyond his years. "I told him we'd always be connected now, even after they take out the thing in his tummy. He says we have a special connection that not even those bad people understand." Agent Morales, driving their sedan, glanced in the rearview mirror with interest. "The boy can communicate with the dog? How is that possible?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, stroking Noah's hair as he leaned against her, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "But after everything we've seen tonight, I'm beginning to believe anything is possible." Scout laid his head on Noah's lap, his eyes beginning to drift closed. The danger was past, at least for now. James was safe. The truth about North Star would soon be exposed, and whatever uncertain future awaited them, they would face it together, a family forged not by blood, but by an extraordinary bond that transcended explanation. As Noah drifted to sleep, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other miracles might be possible in a world where a boy could speak to a dog, where courage knew no age limit, and where the purest hearts could find each other even in the darkest circumstances. What kind of connection could allow a child to understand a dog so perfectly? Is it something we all possess but have forgotten how to use? The safe house was a secluded cabin nestled in the foothills, surrounded by dense pine forest and protected by a state-of-the-art security system. As they pulled up the gravel driveway, Sarah noted the unmarked vehicles already parked outside, and the discreet figures patrolling the perimeter, FBI agents ensuring their safety. Noah had slept for most of the journey, his small body curled against Scout. The German shepherd had remained vigilant despite his own exhaustion, amber eyes tracking every movement outside the car windows. Only when they stopped did Scout allow himself to relax slightly, his tail giving a tentative wag as Noah stirred. "Are we safe now?" Noah asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes as Sarah helped him from the car. "Yes, sweetie," she assured him, though she couldn't quite believe it herself. The events of the past 12 hours seemed too fantastical, too terrifying to have actually happened. Yet, here they were, under FBI protection, having escaped a corporate conspiracy that sounded like something from a science fiction novel. Inside the cabin, they found James already being examined by a medical team. Dr. Rivera hovered nearby, her professional demeanor firmly back in place, as she discussed James's condition with what appeared to be a neurologist. The moment Scout entered the room, James's face lit up with relief. "There you are," he said weakly, extending a hand toward his dog. Scout patted over immediately, resting his head on the examination table beside his owner. "I was worried they'd separated us." "The boy insisted they stay together," Agent Morales explained, entering behind Sarah and Noah. "Said something about the dog being upset if they were apart." James studied Noah with newfound interest. "You're the one who can hear Scout," he said. It wasn't a question. Noah nodded, suddenly shy in the presence of so many strangers. Not like real talking, more like feelings and pictures in my head. That's exactly how it works for me too, James said, wincing as the doctor probed the small surgical scar behind his ear, the entry point for North Star's neural implant. Though I thought it was because of this thing they put in my head. Agent Morales pulled up a chair for Sarah and Noah, then took one himself. I think it's time you all told me exactly what happened, from the beginning. For the next hour, they pieced together the extraordinary story. Sarah and Noah finding Scout at the cemetery, the fake animal control officer, Dr. Rivera's involvement, the warehouse rescue, and Noah's inexplicable ability to communicate with Scout. As they spoke, medical personnel came and went, checking James's vital signs and preparing for the delicate surgery to remove the implants. We've been investigating North Star for months, Morales revealed when they had finished. We knew they were developing some kind of biotech, possibly for military applications, but we couldn't get close enough to prove anything illegal. James was our first real breakthrough. What will happen to Dr. Keller? Sarah asked. And the others involved? We're raiding their main facility as we speak, Morales replied, checking his phone for updates. Keller wasn't at the warehouse, but we'll find her. She can't hide forever, not with the evidence we've gathered tonight. A surgeon entered the room, her face masked but her eyes kind as she approached James. We're ready for you, Mr. Blackwood. The procedure should take about 2 hours. We'll remove the implant and ensure there's no damage to the surrounding tissue. James nodded, then turned to Scout, who was watching the proceedings with intelligent concern. You're next, buddy. Don't worry. They'll take good care of us both. As they wheeled James away, Dr. Rivera approached Scout cautiously, a small device in her hand. I need to scan him before surgery to pinpoint the exact location of his implant, she explained to Noah, who still had his hand protectively on Scout's back. It's okay, Noah told Scout. She's trying to help. The German Shepherd remained perfectly still as Dr. Rivera ran the scanner over his body, the device beeping when it located the foreign object. It's exactly where we thought, she confirmed, marking the spot with a small X on Scout's fur, just behind the ribs near the spine. The surgeon should be able to remove it without complications. Will it hurt him? Noah asked anxiously. He'll be fully anesthetized, Dr. Rivera assured him. He won't feel a thing, and when he wakes up, he'll be free of North Star's control forever. A veterinary surgical team arrived shortly after, ready to take Scout for his procedure. Noah knelt beside the dog, wrapping his arms around Scout's neck in a tight hug. You'll be okay, he whispered. I'll be right here waiting when you wake up. Scout licked Noah's cheek once, then followed the veterinarians without hesitation, his gait steady and determined despite all he had endured. With both patients in surgery, the cabin fell into an uneasy quiet. Morales continued to receive updates on his phone, occasionally stepping outside to take calls. Dr. Rivera sat with Sarah and Noah in the small living room, the weight of exhaustion finally settling over them now that the immediate danger had passed. How did you know? Sarah asked the veterinarian. About North Star, about James being missing. You seemed to understand what was happening from the moment we arrived at your clinic. Dr. Rivera's expression softened. James and I were colleagues first, then friends. When he discovered what North Star was doing to those dogs, he came to me for help. He needed someone with veterinary expertise to document the evidence, to understand the medical implications of their experiments. Were you and James close? Sarah asked, noting the way Dr. Rivera's voice changed when she spoke of him. A faint blush colored the veterinarian's cheeks. We were getting there, before he disappeared. She glanced toward the hallway where they had taken James for surgery. I've spent the last 2 weeks searching for him, following every lead, checking every hospital and morgue. When Scout showed up with you, it was like a miracle. Why would a dog lead my son and me to a fresh grave with no headstone? Sarah wondered aloud. What was Scout trying to tell us? Dr. Rivera considered this. The empty grave was meant for James, she said finally. North Star was planning to eliminate him once they'd extracted what they needed, both information and the prototype implant. Scout must have escaped during transport and somehow sensed where they were planning to dispose of his owner. But how did he find us specifically? Sarah pressed. Out of all the people who might have visited that cemetery? I think that's where your son comes in, Dr. Rivera said, glancing at Noah, who was dozing against Sarah's side. Some children have a natural empathy that adults lose as they grow. Maybe Scout sensed that in Noah, a mind open enough to receive what he was trying to communicate. It was a comforting thought, if not entirely scientific. Sarah stroked her son's hair, marveling at the extraordinary sensitivity that had led them into danger, and then guided them safely out again. Hours passed in a fog of exhaustion and sporadic updates. James's surgery was completed successfully, the implant removed and preserved as evidence. Scout's procedure took less time, and by midnight, both patients were in recovery, sedated but stable. Sarah had just managed to get Noah to lie down in one of the cabin's spare bedrooms when Morales returned, his expression grim. "We've got a problem," he said without preamble. "Dr. Keller has disappeared. She wasn't at the main facility when our team raided it, and she's disabled all her known electronic accounts. She's gone off the grid." "She'll come for them," Dr. Rivera said immediately. "For James and Scout. They're her star subjects, the proof of concept for whatever North Star was planning to sell to the highest bidder." "We've thought of that," Morales assured her. "This location is secure, and we're planning to move everyone to a more permanent safe house tomorrow, once James and Scout are stable enough to travel." Despite his confidence, Sarah felt a chill run through her. Dr. Keller had struck her as the type of woman who always had contingency plans, who wouldn't give up her life's work without a fight. "What about Noah?" she asked quietly. Keller seemed particularly interested in his connection with Scout. Morales' expression softened slightly. "Your son will have round-the-clock protection until we're certain the threat is neutralized. You both will, I promise." Sarah nodded, though the reassurance did little to ease her growing sense of unease. Throughout this ordeal, Noah's uncanny bond with Scout had guided them, warned them, saved them. What if that connection was weakened now that the implant was gone? What if they couldn't sense danger approaching until it was too late? As if reading her thoughts, Dr. Rivera touched her arm gently. "Try to get some rest. Both James and Scout will need us at full strength when they wake up." Sarah allowed herself to be led to another bedroom, though she knew sleep would be elusive. She lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the day's events on an endless loop. Finding Scout at the cemetery, Noah's instant connection with him, the chase, the rescue, the revelations about North Star's horrifying experiments. She must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing she knew, she was jolted awake by Noah's voice. "Mommy! Mommy, wake up!" Sarah sat up with a gasp, momentarily disoriented. Noah stood by her bed, his expression urgent. "What is it, sweetie? What's wrong?" "Scout's awake. He's calling for me." Noah was already heading for the door, apparently unconcerned that it was still dark outside, the cabin quiet except for the occasional murmur of agents changing shifts. Sarah followed her son to the small room where Scout had been placed post-surgery. The German Shepherd was indeed awake, his amber eyes alert despite the lingering effects of anesthesia. A protective cone had been placed around his neck to prevent him from disturbing the surgical site, but otherwise, he appeared remarkably well. When he saw Noah, Scout's tail thumped weakly against the blanket, a soft whine escaping him. "He says his tummy hurts, but he feels lighter now," Noah reported, carefully petting Scout's head, avoiding the IV line taped to one leg. "Like something heavy is gone. The implant," Sarah realized. "He can feel the difference."
Noah nodded seriously. "He can still talk to me, Mommy, even without the special thing in him."
Sarah felt a wave of relief. Whatever bond had formed between her son and this extraordinary dog, it transcended the technology that had been forced upon Scout. It was something genuine, something pure, a connection that couldn't be explained by science alone. A slight movement in the doorway caught her attention. James stood there, leaning heavily on a cane someone had found for him, his face pale, but his eyes clear. "Should you be out of bed?" Sarah asked, concerned by how unsteady he looked. James managed a weak smile. "Probably not, but I heard Scout was awake, and I needed to see him." He made his way to the dog's bedside, where Scout greeted him with the same gentle enthusiasm he had shown Noah. "Hey, buddy, we made it." "He's really happy to see you," Noah reported, his hand still resting on Scout's head. "He was worried they hurt you too badly." James glanced at Noah, that same fascination in his eyes. "You really can understand him, can't you? Even now, with the implants gone." Noah nodded. "I always could. Scout says lots of kids can hear animals, but grown-ups forget how." The simplicity of the statement hung in the air between them, not scientific, not technological, just a fundamental truth that perhaps only a child could express so clearly. Their quiet reunion was interrupted by commotion outside, raised voices, hurried footsteps. Moments later, Agent Morales appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. "We need to move, now." Perimeter sensors picked up movement in the woods surrounding the property. "Dr. Keller?" Sarah asked, her heart sinking. Morales nodded grimly. "Most likely. We've got vehicles ready out back. James, can you walk, or do you need assistance?" "I can manage," James insisted, though his grip on the cane tightened visibly. "What about Scout?" Noah asked anxiously. "He just had surgery." Dr. Rivera appeared behind Morales, already gathering medical supplies. "I'll disconnect his IV and bring his medications. He should be able to walk to the car." Everyone sprang into action. Sarah helped Noah get dressed while Dr. Rivera prepared Scout for transport. James, despite his protests, accepted help from one of the agents to make his way to the waiting vehicles. Outside, the night was unnaturally still. No wind rustled the pine branches, no nocturnal creatures called in the darkness. Just the hushed preparations of the FBI team as they readied for evacuation. They were halfway to the vehicles when Noah stopped suddenly, his eyes wide with alarm. "Scout says they're already here," he whispered. "Inside the circle." Morales instantly signaled to his team, who raised their weapons, scanning the tree line. "Where?" he asked Noah. "Can Scout tell where they are?" Before Noah could answer, floodlights blazed to life, surrounding the cabin clearing with blinding white light. From the trees emerged a dozen figures in tactical gear, weapons raised. "Federal agents!" Morales shouted, positioning himself in front of the civilians. "Stand down!" A familiar voice replied from beyond the light, cool, controlled, dangerous. "I think not, Agent Morales. Your jurisdiction ends where national security begins." Dr. Keller stepped into the clearing, flanked by men who wore no FBI insignia but carried themselves with military precision. "I'm here under the authority of Project Sentinel, a classified program with clearance levels well above your pay grade." Morales didn't lower his weapon. "There is no Project Sentinel on any official registry. Whatever you're claiming, Dr. Keller, it doesn't legitimize kidnapping, illegal experimentation, or attempted murder." "Such limited vision," Keller sighed. "What we've developed at North Star goes beyond commercial applications. Imagine soldiers neurally linked to canine units, sharing sensory input, communicating without detectable signals. Imagine diplomatic pouches that walk themselves across borders without human handlers. The possibilities are endless." "And illegal," James spoke up, his voice stronger than his body. "Not to mention unethical. Those dogs suffered. I suffered." "Necessary sacrifices," Keller dismissed. "But you, James, you were never meant to be harmed. You were to be our crowning achievement, the perfect human-canine neural bridge. And now," her gaze shifted to Noah, "we've found someone even more receptive to the technology, a child whose neural plasticity exceeds all our models." Sarah instinctively pulled Noah behind her. "You're not touching my son." "Mrs. Mitchell," Keller said, her tone almost pitying, "your son has an extraordinary gift. We can help him develop it, understand it. Under our guidance, he could revolutionize interspecies communication." "You mean exploit it?" Sarah retorted. "Turn him into a lab rat, just like you did with Scout and James." Scout, who had been standing quietly beside Noah, suddenly began to growl, a low, dangerous sound that seemed to vibrate through the clearing. Despite his weakened state, the dog moved forward, placing himself between Keller's forces and the people he had chosen to protect. "Fascinating," Keller observed. "Even without the implant, the bond persists. All the more reason to continue our research." Morales and his agents still had their weapons trained on Keller's team, creating a tense standoff. "Whatever authority you think you have," Morales said steadily, "it doesn't extend to kidnapping civilians or threatening federal agents. Stand down, or this ends badly for everyone." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Noah stepped forward, still holding Scout's fur, but with a determination in his young face that belied his age. "Scout says you're lying," he said simply. "There is no Project Sentinel. You made it up because you were afraid of going to jail." Keller's composed expression faltered slightly. "Children should be seen and not heard," she said coldly, "and dogs should certainly not be heard at all." "But Scout is heard," Noah insisted. "I hear him. James hears him. And he says you are scared because the real government people found out what you were doing, and they're coming for you right now. As if summoned by Noah's words, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors cut through the night air. Spotlights swept the clearing as two military helicopters appeared overhead, their downdraft bending the pine branches below. "This is the U.S. Marshal Service," boomed a voice from one of the aircraft. "All personnel on the ground, lower your weapons and place your hands on your heads. This area is now under federal jurisdiction." Keller's face contorted with fury. "Who did you contact?" she demanded of Morales. "This operation is classified." "Not anymore," Morales replied with grim satisfaction. "While you were busy tracking us, we were busy exposing you. Every piece of evidence from the warehouse and main facility has been uploaded to secure servers. Your Project Sentinel is now in the public domain, Dr. Keller. Game over." For a moment, it seemed Keller might order her men to fight anyway. But as more spotlights flooded the clearing and armed marshals began to rappel from the helicopters, she visibly deflated. "Stand down," she ordered her team, her voice hollow with defeat. "Stand down." As Keller and her operatives were secured by the marshals, Morales turned to Sarah, Noah, James, and Dr. Rivera. "You're safe now, for real this time. These marshals will escort you to a secured medical facility where James and Scout can recover properly." Sarah felt relief flood through her, so powerful it made her knees weak. Noah knelt beside Scout, hugging the dog gently, mindful of his surgical wound. "We did it," he whispered into Scout's fur. "You found James, and now the bad people can't hurt anyone else." Scout licked Noah's cheek, then turned to James, who knelt painfully to join them. The three of them formed a circle, man, child, and dog, connected by something that transcended technology, that couldn't be manufactured or controlled. As they were led to a waiting transport helicopter, Noah maintained his grip on Scout's fur, the German shepherd walking steadily despite his recent surgery, drawing strength from the boy beside him. "Will we see Scout again?" Noah asked as they were helped aboard, his eyes fixed on James. "After all this is over?" James glanced at Sarah, then back to Noah. "I think Scout would be very unhappy if he never saw you again. You two have a special bond." "Maybe," Sarah began hesitantly, "maybe once everything is settled, we could arrange regular visits." The hope that bloomed on Noah's face was nearly enough to erase the trauma of the past 24 hours. "Really? Scout could come play with me sometimes?" "I think that could be arranged," James agreed, his hand resting on Scout's head. "After all, you're practically family now." As the helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from danger and toward a future none of them could have imagined when they woke up yesterday morning, Sarah watched her son and Scout leaning against each other, both exhausted but victorious. Whatever came next, debriefings, testimonies, the inevitable media storm once North Star's activities became public, they would face it together. A family forged in extraordinary circumstances, bound by courage, loyalty, and a connection that defied explanation. In a world obsessed with technology, it had taken a child and a dog to remind them all of the most powerful communication tool of all, an open heart. If a dog and a child could form such a deep connection in just one day, what other mysterious bonds might exist in our world that we've simply forgotten how to see? 3 months passed, like a dream and a lifetime all at once. Spring blossomed into early summer, bringing with it warm breezes and the sweet scent of renewal. For Sarah and Noah, life had transformed in ways they could never have imagined on that rainy day at Evergreen Cemetery. The secured medical facility where they'd initially been taken had quickly given way to a series of safe houses as the investigation into North Star breeding enterprises unfolded. Dr. Victoria Keller and her associates faced multiple federal charges, from illegal human experimentation to corporate espionage. The evidence was overwhelming, much of it provided by James's meticulous documentation of the company's activities. Today, Sarah stood in the kitchen of their new home, a charming cottage on the outskirts of town, purchased with the help of a generous government settlement. Through the window, she could see Noah in the backyard, playing an elaborate game of fetch with Scout. The German shepherd had made a full recovery from his surgery, his coat glossy and thick, no trace remaining of the malnourished creature they'd found by the empty grave. The doorbell rang, pulling Sarah from her reverie. She opened it to find James and Dr. Rivera, Elena, as she now called her, standing on the porch with a bottle of wine and a small gift bag. "Right on time," Sarah greeted them warmly. Their weekly dinners had become a cherished ritual, a way of processing all they had been through together and celebrating the new life that had emerged from the chaos. "We wouldn't miss it," Elena replied, handing over the wine. "Especially today, 3 months since the rescue. It feels important to mark the occasion." James nodded, his gaze drifting to the backyard where Noah and Scout were now engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation. Though still walking with a slight limp, a lingering effect of his ordeal, James had otherwise recovered remarkably well. The neural implant had been removed without complication, leaving only a small scar behind his ear to remind him of what he'd endured. "How's the research coming?" Sarah asked as she led them into the living room, which was gradually becoming less sparse as she and Noah settled into their new home. James brightened. "Fascinating results. The FBI has given me access to all the North Star data they seized, and I'm working with a team at the university to understand exactly how the neural implants functioned. There's legitimate science there, beneath all the criminal applications. And ethical applications, potentially," Elena added. "The ability to better understand animal cognition, to communicate more effectively across species, there's real promise there, if approached responsibly." Sarah nodded, though she couldn't help glancing toward the backyard again. Noah hadn't needed any implant or special technology to form his bond with Scout. That connection had been immediate, instinctive, something pure that science might explain but could never quite capture. The back door burst open and Noah rushed in, Scout at his heels. "James! Elena!" the boy cried, throwing himself into James's arms with the easy affection of a child who had been through battle, alongside an adult. "Scout says he can smell the cookies you brought." Elena laughed, bending to greet the German shepherd. "Good nose, Scout. They're peanut butter, your favorite." James studied Noah with that same fascination he had shown from the beginning. "You can still understand him completely, 3 months after the implant was removed?" Noah nodded, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Of course. Scout says his brain feels clearer now without the buzzing thing inside him. He can think better." "Fascinating," James murmured. "The implant enhanced my connection with Scout, but you never needed that enhancement. Your natural ability exceeds anything North Star's technology could achieve." Sarah had heard variations of this conversation many times over the past months. The scientists studying North Star's work could measure the electrical impulses, map the neural pathways, document the physiological responses, but none of them could fully explain how a 5-year-old boy could intuitively understand a dog's thoughts and feelings with such clarity. "Agent Morales called this morning," she said, changing the subject as she poured wine for the adults and juice for Noah. "Dr. Keller's trial has been set for September. They want us all to testify." A shadow crossed James's face. "I'll be there. The world needs to understand what happened, not just the criminal aspects, but the ethical implications. What North Star did crossed lines that should never be crossed, no matter how promising the technology." Elena placed a hand over his, a gesture of comfort that spoke to the relationship that had deepened between them since the rescue. "We'll all be there, together." Their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of James's phone. He glanced at the screen, then excused himself to take the call in the hallway. When he returned minutes later, his expression was unreadable. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. James hesitated. "That was Dr. Whitman from the research team. They've been examining the implant they removed from Scout, and they've discovered something unexpected." Noah, who had been feeding Scout small pieces of cookie, looked up with sudden interest. "The implant is still working," he said simply. All 3 adults turned to stare at him. "What do you mean, Noah?" Elena asked gently. "Scout told me," the boy replied with a shrug. "The thing they took out of him, part of it is still sending signals, like a tiny radio." James's face paled. "That's exactly what Dr. Whitman just told me. The core component of the implant contains a secondary transmitter that remained active even after removal. They only discovered it today when they subjected it to a new type of scan." "But what does that mean?" Sarah asked, alarm coursing through her. "If it's still transmitting, could North Star still be tracking Scout? Tracking us?" "It's more complicated than that," James said, kneeling to meet Noah's eyes. "Noah, did Scout tell you anything else about the implant? About what it might be doing?" Noah closed his eyes briefly, his hand resting on Scout's head in that now familiar gesture of communion. "He says it's not talking to bad people, it's talking to the others." "What others?" Elena pressed. The other dogs, Noah explained, as if it were obvious. The ones that got away from the bad place. They're all connected, like a family. They help each other stay hidden. James and Elena exchanged a meaningful look. The missing dogs, Elena said. The reports we found in North Star's files, over a dozen experimental subjects unaccounted for when the facility was raided. Are you saying there are more dogs like Scout out there? Sarah asked. With these implants still inside them? James nodded slowly. It appears so. And if Noah is right, they're somehow communicating with each other through the implants, creating their own network, independent of North Star's control systems. Scout moved to the center of their small circle, his intelligent eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. He whined softly, then turned to Noah. Scout says the other dogs need help, Noah translated, his young voice suddenly serious. Some of them are sick or hurt. They don't trust people anymore, but they trust Scout. He wants to find them. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Just when they thought the North Star chapter of their lives was closing, a new page was turning. Even if we wanted to help, how would we find these dogs? They could be anywhere. Not anywhere, James said, his scientific mind already racing with possibilities. The transmission range of these implants is limited. If they're communicating with Scout's implant, they must be within a 50-mile radius, at most. And Scout can lead us to them, Noah added confidently. He knows where they are, in his head, like a map. Elena leaned forward, her medical training coming to the fore. If these dogs have active implants, they could be suffering complications, infection, rejection, neural disruption. They need veterinary care. And if North Star had any remaining operatives who escaped the FBI's net, James added grimly, they might be looking for these dogs too, to recover their technology or silence the evidence. Sarah looked at her son, at the determination in his young face, and at Scout, who sat alert and ready beside him. The bond between them had already led them through danger once before. Now it was calling them to action again. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it spoken aloud. "A rescue mission," James said simply. "Find the dogs, remove the implants, ensure they're safe, and in the process, gather more evidence against North Star and its backers." "It could be dangerous," Elena cautioned. "We don't know who else might be looking for these animals." Noah stood straighter, his hand buried in Scout's fur. "Scout says we have to help them. They're scared and alone, like he was." Sarah looked around at this unlikely family that fate had brought together. A brilliant veterinarian, a courageous scientist, a remarkable dog, and her extraordinary son. Against all odds, they had survived a conspiracy that could have claimed all their lives. Perhaps they were uniquely qualified for this new challenge. "If we do this," she said slowly, "we do it right, with proper planning and backup. I won't put Noah at risk again." "Agent Morales," James suggested. "He'd want to know about this. The FBI's resources could help ensure everyone's safety." Elena was already on her phone, pulling up a map of the region. "If we triangulate the signal from Scout's removed implant, we might be able to narrow down search areas. And I have colleagues at the emergency veterinary clinic who can be trusted to help with medical care for the dogs." Scout barked once, as if approving their plan, and Noah smiled. "He says the closest one is a black dog named Shadow. She's hiding in the old train yard." "The abandoned switch yard on the east side of town," James clarified, and Noah nodded. "We should go tonight," Elena said. "If these dogs are injured or ill, every hour counts." Sarah hesitated, protective instincts warring with the knowledge that her son's gift was essential to their mission. "Noah stays with me at all times," she said finally, "and at the first sign of trouble, we withdraw and call Morales." The plan came together with surprising speed. James contacted Agent Morales, who, after initial skepticism, agreed to provide discreet backup. Elena gathered medical supplies and contacted 2 trusted colleagues. Sarah packed a bag for herself and Noah, including food, water, and warm clothing, in case the night grew cool. As darkness fell, they set out in 2 vehicles, Sarah, Noah, and Scout in her car, with James and Elena following in his SUV. Scout sat alert in the back seat beside Noah, occasionally whining or barking softly as the boy translated his guidance. "Turn left at the next light," Noah instructed. "Scout says Shadow can feel us getting closer. She's nervous but hopeful." The abandoned switchyard was a ghost of its former self, rusted tracks gleaming dully in the moonlight, dilapidated buildings standing like sentinels from another era. Sarah parked at the perimeter, as did James and Elena behind them. In the distance, they could see Morales' unmarked vehicle, keeping watch from a discreet distance. "Let Scout lead," James suggested as they gathered their supplies. "If Shadow is frightened, she's more likely to respond to another dog than to humans." Scout needed no encouragement. With Noah beside him, he trotted confidently into the switchyard, nose working the air, occasionally stopping to listen for sounds beyond human hearing. The adults followed several paces behind, flashlights sweeping the shadows. They found Shadow exactly where Scout had indicated, in the shell of an old station building, huddled beneath what had once been a ticket counter. She was indeed black, a mixed breed with a sleek coat and wary eyes that gleamed in the darkness. When she saw Scout, her tail gave a tentative wag, but she growled softly as the humans approached. "She's been hurt before," Noah whispered, "by people in white coats. Scout is telling her we're different." Elena knelt, keeping a respectful distance from the frightened dog. "It's okay, girl," she said softly. "We're here to help." For several tense minutes, they waited while Scout and Shadow communicated in their silent language. Gradually, the black dog's posture relaxed, and she crept forward to sniff Noah's extended hand. "She says her head hurts all the time," Noah reported, "and there's a bump on her side that bleeds sometimes." Elena nodded grimly. "The implant site is likely infected. We need to get her to the clinic right away." With patience and gentle coaxing, they managed to lead Shadow to James's SUV. The black dog was reluctant to leave Scout, so they decided Noah would ride with James and Elena, providing comfort to both dogs during the journey. "Shadow says there are more," Noah told them as they drove toward Elena's clinic. "A small brown dog near the river, and 2 others in the old factory district. They have been helping each other find food and safe places to sleep." "A pack," James mused. "They've formed their own pack, coordinated through the implants. It's extraordinary." "It's survival," Elena corrected gently. "They're doing what dogs have always done, adapting, cooperating, enduring. The implants just gave them a new way to do it." At the clinic, Elena's colleagues were waiting as promised. Shadow tensed at the sight of the medical facility, but Scout's presence kept her calm enough for examination. The diagnosis confirmed their fears. Her implant had partially migrated, causing inflammation and infection. She would need surgery immediately. "What about the others?" Sarah asked as Shadow was prepared for the procedure. "If their conditions are similar, they need help too." "We'll find them all," James assured her. "One at a time. Scout and Noah will guide us." Over the next week, their rescue mission continued. Each night, they ventured out to a new location, identified through Scout and Noah's mysterious communication network. They found Rusty, a terrier mix, living under a bridge by the river. Then came twins Pepper and Salt, inseparable despite their ordeal, hiding in an abandoned factory, just as Noah had described. Each dog bore the same surgical scar, each carried the same dangerous technology inside them, and each responded to Scout's presence with immediate recognition and trust. As Elena and her team removed the implants one by one, James studied the devices, mapping the communication patterns, building a complete picture of North Star's experimental network. "It's both horrifying and brilliant," he admitted late one night as they gathered in Elena's clinic, surrounded by recovering dogs. They created a self-sustaining system, with each implant capable of receiving, boosting, and retransmitting signals. The dogs essentially became living nodes in a mesh network. But they never anticipated the dogs would use that network for their own purposes, Sarah observed. Watching Noah sleeping peacefully on a cot in the corner, Scout curled protectively beside him. They underestimated the bond between the animals. "And they certainly never expected Noah," Elena added softly. "A human who could tap into that network naturally, without technology." The last dog proved the most elusive. According to Scout via Noah, this final member of the escaped pack, a golden retriever named Sunny, had ventured further from the city, making her home in the same foothills where they had found temporary refuge after James's rescue. "She's the oldest," Noah explained as they drove along winding mountain roads, following Scout's guidance. "She helped all the others escape. She was the first one Scout met when the bad men threw him from the car." The sun was setting by the time they reached the area Scout indicated, a densely wooded hillside overlooking a small lake. As they began their search, Morales joined them. having maintained a watchful presence throughout their mission. We've identified 3 more former North Star employees through the data recovered from those implants, he informed them. They have been operating independently, trying to recover the escaped test subjects before we could find them. Are they here? Sarah asked, suddenly alert for danger. Now? Morales shook his head. We arrested the last of them yesterday, but they'd tracked Sonny to this general area. That's why I wanted to join you tonight, just to be safe. Scout led them deeper into the woods, following a trail only he could detect. Noah walked beside him, translating occasional updates. She knows we're coming. She's nervous but ready. They found Sonny in a small natural cave, partially hidden by fallen logs. Unlike the other dogs, who had been frightened and defensive, the golden retriever watched their approach with calm dignity. Her coat was matted and dull, but her eyes were clear and intelligent. When she saw Scout, her tail thumped once against the cave floor, a gesture of recognition rather than excitement. She's been waiting for us, Noah said, his voice filled with wonder. She knew we would come eventually. As Elena approached slowly to examine Sonny, the retriever rose to meet her, offering no resistance. The veterinarian's gentle examination revealed what they had feared. Sonny's implant was causing serious complications, with signs of infection spreading through her system. We need to get her to the clinic immediately, Elena said, her professional calm masking the urgency of the situation. This infection is advanced. They transported Sonny with care, Scout riding beside her in the back of Morales' vehicle, never leaving her side. At the clinic, Elena and her team moved swiftly, preparing for emergency surgery while James consulted on the safest approach to removing the compromised implant. Noah refused to leave, insisting that Scout needed him there. Sarah, seeing the determination in her son's eyes, didn't argue. They waited together in the clinic's small lounge, Scout resting his head on Noah's lap, both seemingly deep in silent communication. Hours passed before Elena emerged from surgery, her face drawn with exhaustion, but eyes bright with relief. We got it, she announced. The infection was extensive, but we've cleaned and treated the affected tissue. With antibiotics and proper care, she should recover fully. Can we see her? Noah asked immediately. Elena nodded. She's still under anesthesia, but yes, you can see her. In the recovery area, Sonny lay peacefully on a padded table, her breathing steady, her golden coat freshly cleaned and shining under the soft lights. Scout approached first, sniffing her gently, then looked back at Noah as if confirming what he already knew. Scout says she's going to be okay, Noah reported. She's the bravest of all of them. She led them all to safety. James, who had been examining the removed implant, joined them with tablet in hand. This is the most sophisticated one yet, he said. It appears to be the master node of the network, the primary transmitter that coordinated communication between all the others. Sonny wasn't just the oldest escape, she was the key to the entire system. Is that why she was the worst affected? Sarah asked. Likely, Elena confirmed. The more complex the implant, the greater the risk of rejection and complication. She's lucky to have survived this long. 3 days later, Sonny was strong enough to be moved from the clinic. The question of where she would go, where all the rescued dogs would go, had been discussed extensively among their unlikely team. Shadow and the twins had already been placed with carefully vetted adopters who understood their special needs. Rusty was thriving in a foster home, regaining his trust in humans day by day. Sonny could stay with us, James suggested, as they watched the golden retriever resting in the sun outside Elena's clinic. Our place is big enough for 2 dogs, and Scout would appreciate the company. Elena nodded her agreement. They have been through so much together. It seems right to keep them connected. Noah, who had been unusually quiet during this discussion, finally spoke up. Sonny wants to stay with us, he said, looking up at his mother with hopeful eyes. With me and Mommy and Scout when he visits. She says she wants to help teach me. Teach you what, sweetie? Sarah asked, kneeling to her son's level. How to listen better, Noah replied simply. To all animals, not just the special ones like Scout. She says I have a gift that needs to grow. Sarah looked at the golden retriever, who met her gaze with serene understanding. Then at Scout, whose loyalty and courage had changed their lives forever. And finally at her remarkable son, who had opened her eyes to a world of connection she'd never imagined possible. I think, she said slowly, that our home has room for one more miracle. 3 months after Sonny came to live with them, the final North Star trial concluded with guilty verdicts across the board. Dr. Keller received a lengthy prison sentence, and the company's assets were seized and redistributed, a portion going to a newly established foundation for ethical animal research. James and Elena, now openly a couple, had turned their expertise toward developing non-invasive methods of animal communication, inspired by Noah's natural abilities. Scout divided his time between their home and Sarah's, a bridge between the two households that had become, in all the ways that mattered, a single family. And Noah, under Sonny's patient tutelage, found his gift expanding beyond Scout, beyond dogs, a growing ability to sense and interpret the silent language of all creatures, a gift that promised to change how humans understood their place in the world of living beings. On the anniversary of that rainy day at Evergreen Cemetery, they gathered at Sarah's home. James and Elena, Agent Morales, the veterinarians who had helped save the dogs, and even a few of the adoptive families with their special charges. Scout and Sonny moved among the guests like gracious hosts, accepting treats and affection with dignified appreciation. As dusk fell, Noah sat on the porch steps with a dog on either side, his small face illuminated by the golden light spilling from the windows behind him. Sarah, watching from inside, felt a sense of wonder that had never diminished since the day her son first whispered, "He's talking to me, Mommy." In a world of technology and disconnection, it had taken a desperate dog and an open-hearted child to remind them all of the most profound truth, that love, courage, and understanding could bridge any gap, heal any wound, and forge connections that no science could fully explain. And somewhere in that truth lay the greatest miracle of all, the knowledge that every barrier between hearts is an illusion, waiting to be dissolved by those brave enough to listen with more than just their ears. Sometimes the most extraordinary connections begin with a simple moment of trust between unlikely friends. If you were given the ability to understand animals, which one would you want to talk to first? Like, share, subscribe, and tell us in the comments below.